So let's talk about all things chronic stress. So we know we're surrounded by stress all day long. Now, in a previous video, we talked a little bit about what that normal stress response looks like. We understand that the stress response in and of itself is very important because it helps our body get through stressful situations and it helps us survive. So really, primitively speaking, the stress response is a survival response. Now, in modern day, we call that the fight or flight response. So just to recap, if we think about everything that happens in our body, if we have to run away from a lion, that's pretty much what that normal stress response is going to be. So we're going to have an increase in blood sugar. That's going to be driven by cortisol. That cortisol is also going to help increase blood supply to the brain, increase glucose receptivity in the brain, and start to drive energy into the muscles and tissues. We're also going to have an increase in a hormone called adrenaline. Both of those hormones produced by the adrenal glands, signaled by the brain. That adrenaline is going to increase our heart rate, increase our blood pressure, create shallow breathing. These hormones together are going to start to modulate immune function, shut down some of that immune function. It's going to slow down the digestive system. And so all of these things are designed to help you get away from a lion, to focus all of our attention and our energy on protection. The problem is that we're not just running away from a lion and then escaping and all things are normal again. The problem is that we're surrounded by stressors all day long. If you think about it, most people, they wake up, they've got screaming kids, they've got husbands that are yelling at them, they got wives that are stressing them out, they go to a job they hate, they got to drive through traffic to get there, they get honked at on the road, and every day, all day, we're surrounded by stress. And if every single time we encounter one of those stresses, the alarm bells start going off in our brain and we start getting thrown into that fight or flight stage, we're going to have a constant movement of our body towards that sympathetic dominant state where, again, we have an increased heart rate, we have shallow breathing, we have higher blood pressure, we have higher glucose levels, we have diminished digestive function, we have altered immune function. And while those are important and they're safe in the short term, they're not healthy in the long term. So we look at what this chronic stress does to the body, and we understand that chronic stress can start to cause all sorts of cardiovascular issues. It can start to cause all sorts of digestive issues. It can cause immune suppression. And we look at things that people are dying from these days. Cardiovascular disease is the #1 cause of death in the United States. If we want to understand why we have so much cardiovascular disease, we have to understand the systems that are modulating the stress response, because stress response plays a huge role in cardiovascular function. We also look at digestive distress. How many people are suffering from digestive issues, whether it's as simple as gas and bloating after meals, whether it's heartburn, GERD, indigestion, whether we're having constipation, diarrhea, things like that. How can we expect that our digestive systems are going to function normally if we're constantly diverting blood flow away from the digestion, if we're constantly reducing stomach acid? Stomach acid is so important. I've got a whole nother video I talk about heartburn, indigestion, GERD, reflux, and how stomach acid plays a crucial role in that. Well, if we know that the acute stress response is going to blunt stomach acid production, and if we know that we're in that chronic stress response where we then permanently have low levels of stomach acid, how can we expect our stomach or our digestive system to work properly? So we've got all these chronic health conditions, and we know that stress plays a huge role in that. So we have to start to talk about what are some strategies and things that we can do to help reduce that stress response. Well, #1 is we have to focus on kind of getting ourselves out of the stress reaction, right? It's our brain's perception of the environment. Now, there are some people that are going to be more perceptive or more receptive to stressful responses than others. So we think about things like PTSD, people who have had severe trauma in previous points in their lives. We know that people who have survived car crashes and airplane crashes and things like that are going to be a lot more sensitive to stresses. We all know someone who hears a loud noise and flinches versus people who can be chaos all around them, but they seem steadfast and it doesn't seem like it affects them. So there's different ways that we can cope to different stresses in our life. And the important thing is understanding, #1, where the stress is coming from. If we know that we've got a job that we hate, yeah, there's things that we can do to help support the body's ability to handle stress. We can do meditation. We can do deep breathing. We can make sure we're focusing on exercise and things like that to get our aggression out. But all of those things are going to be in vain if we don't ever get away from that stressor to begin with. So #1 is if we want to help support the body through a chronic state of stress, we have to understand where the stresses are coming from. Now, with chiropractic philosophy, we talk about 3 different types of stress. So we have our 3 T's, which is thoughts, traumas, and toxins. And a lot of this video, I talked about thoughts. So thoughts are going to be the emotional stresses. That's the screaming kids. That's the fight you got into last night with your spouse. That's the job that you hate. That's the traffic that you're getting stuck in every day on the way to work, right? Those are things that are happening around you, right? So we've got the emotional stress, the thoughts. We've also got the physical stress. So physical stress on your body is exercise. It's the car accident you got into when you were younger. It's the sports that you played, the broken foot, things like that. So the physical stress on your body. And then we've got chemical stress. And chemical stress is really a big one because chemical stress can be the air you breathe, the water that you drink. It can be chronic viral or bacterial infections. It can be mold. It can be Lyme disease. There's all sorts of chronic chemical stresses that we see on the body. So number one thing we have to do is start to evaluate and understand where are the stresses coming from. Because nowadays the stress, again, isn't just running away from a lion. It isn't just a single thing that's causing stress. It's everywhere. So we have to understand what are those chronic stresses, where are they coming from, and then how can we work to remove those stresses. If it's an emotional stress, there's a lot of things that we can do to help support your body's ability to handle that stress. And that's where meditation can be very important. That's where yoga can be very important. That's where exercise can be very important. I personally exercise a lot. If I don't exercise, I don't feel like I handle things around me as well. Part of my exercise is just getting into my own headspace, being alone with my thoughts, thinking through problems, and it's very therapeutic. A lot of people find exercise to be very therapeutic. Now, and this is something we'll talk about in a future visit or a future video, but there is a fine line also between understanding exercise can be very good at helping your body handle the emotional stress, but exercise is a physical stress. And so if we're fixing one stress with another stress, we have to know when is too much, right? So when have we overdone it with the exercise? And when do we have to start to incorporate other strategies that are not putting more stress on your body, right? Because it doesn't matter if it's physical, chemical, or emotional. Stress is a hormonal and a chemical response within your body. So if we're creating that chemical reaction, it doesn't matter if it was a chemical, physical, or emotional stress that created it. Physiologically, the same sort of thing's going to happen in your body. And so we're going to dive into what types of strategies we can start to take, both from an exercise, a therapeutic, a supplemental standpoint to help to eliminate and reduce those stresses.